Boom, boom. How's it going? How's it going? Welcome aboard. This is I, TJ, from M5 Successful Friends, representing M5 Property Varsity, M5 Property Addicts. Hey, it is all around property. If you've never been here, where have you been? If this is your second, third time, hey, good to have you around. And today, it is my pleasure to bring you one of my cool buddies out from Cape Town. And I met this guy a couple of years ago, but I'm going to talk about him a little bit. But we're going to let him introduce himself. Paul Adams, welcome aboard. How's it going?
Thank you so much, TJ. Going very, very well. Thank you for this opportunity.
Good, man. So, Paul, me and you, we actually met almost about close to 2 years ago, I think it was, if my memory serves me correct. And at that particular time, you know, you looked like you were kind of like a foreign guy who's just in a no man's land. And the reason why I say this is because I met you in Cape Town. And actually, we used to share a coach, right? Me and you, we used to share a coach.
Yeah.
And our coach introduced us together, and we took a liking into each other, and we connected. And out of that, I want to go back to the point where I thought, you know, this guy is from a foreign place. You didn't sound anything Cape Town.
That's true.
And I asked the person, so where you're from? And you said, nah, you've just been overseas for a little bit.
Yes.
Who is Paul? And I mean, I just want to zoom into the fact of why were you overseas, you know? Just tell us who you are for a minute.
Great. Thank you so much for that question, TJ. I think firstly, it feels like I know you for 20 years.
Yeah.
And ironically, we met about a year ago, believe it or not. It's only been a year ago.
Wow.
It feels a lot longer. And yeah, absolutely. That meeting to me was life-changing, but we'll get into that. Paul, basically who I am, I'm a local boy from Cape Town. I've got 5 siblings.
Yeah.
I've been pretty much an entrepreneur since I was about 16 years old. Started my first business when I was 16, which was basically selling hair products to females. So to ladies, but no hair.
Yeah.
Which again, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. You just need to know a little bit about the product and you can do it. So my journey basically started as an entrepreneur when I was 16. Since then, I was running from an interior decorating business to getting involved in recruitment, which I did for probably about 7 years. I did that.
Yeah.
And then I took a bit of a sabbatical. Okay. And I left South Africa and I spent close to 6 years in China as a teacher. So I was basically doing a little bit of university lecturing in South Africa, and then decided, you know what, I kind of like the education space. I like learning, and I felt that I could add some value. And so I left, packed up, and now went to China for about over 6 years. Came back.
Teaching in China?
Yeah. I was teaching English and a topic called society, which is basically a combination of what we call EMS in South Africa, Economic Management and Science, I think it's called. Yeah. So it was a combination of that, and that was quite interesting because there I could just use the entrepreneur just came out, and I could just share the business side of who I am to 12-year-olds and 14-year-olds and just influence and impact their lives, hopefully for the better.
Yeah. When you left for China, I know that you're married and you got 2 beautiful daughters.
Correct.
You know, I've just seen pictures of them. I haven't seen them in person, Sister Rai. We'll get to it one of these days. Had COVID not kicked in, I think we could have met. But did you travel with your family when you went to China?
Unfortunately not.
Okay.
And the reason for the travel was almost forced in a way, I would say it.
Yeah.
Forced by economic forces, which I'll touch on a little bit.
Yeah.
But also it was just not possible to pack up the whole family and just leave. And I think deep down in my heart, I always knew I'm going to come back.
Yeah.
I'm going to start a business or businesses.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to uproot my little girls. And just touching on them, Phoenix is 18 years old. She's going to be 19 this year.
Mm-hmm.
And Channing is 13, going to be 14. And
Nice.
I've got a beautiful wife. I don't know why she chose me.
Yeah.
Luckiest guy in the world, man. I know we all feel that way. But
I
I
don't.
left him. I left him here basically because you can imagine, minus the 6 years. Channing was 6 when I left, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was no way I was going to uproot the family for what I felt was a temporary calling. And I
Yeah.
call it a calling because that's what it felt like. So yeah, the family stayed behind.
So Paul, once we are on that, right? You literally was. I mean, I salute you there in terms of the circumstances of your livelihood was not conducive. I should say, maybe let me not use the word conducive, but you were trying to fend for your family, and you found an opportunity at a far distant land, and you packed up your bags as a man, and you left your wife,
Yeah.
and you left your 2 kids. And you were there for year on year. And I don't know what it looked like. Were you coming back for Christmas or not? But I'm just trying to think here. You were gone for 6 years. Your wife was a single parent for the longest time, right? And whether you were sending money home and things like that, but that doesn't replace you as the father of the house. You know, I just want us to zoom in into a little bit on that one. When you came back, did you just pick up life from where you left off? Were there changes? What did it look like? You know, I always try to. I've had opportunities where I've declined going to work in Seychelles. Someone said to me, "TJ, you mad?" I'm like, no. I've declined going to work into Mauritius. I've declined a job in Ghana. I've declined a job in Kenya. But I just want to hear it from you, from someone who actually left their family and then eventually came back.
That's probably a very, very, I wouldn't call it a difficult question, but it was a really, really tough decision to make.
Right.
It was at a time when I just basically had a bad business partner fallout, let's call it that, or blow up.
Yeah.
And I walked away from about 7 million rand at the time. So in my mind, I was going to play the whole entrepreneurial game, supporting other small businesses and help them create wealth.
Right.
And suddenly I had nothing. And my leaving South Africa was forced in a way, but it was also a calling, because at that time when that fallout happened, it was a dark time. It was really, really dark. It was a dark time personally, and it was a dark time for family. And I just couldn't bear, quite frankly, being in South Africa. It was really a time when you need to get out. If you've ever felt like you're busy imploding, that was what it felt like. So to a certain extent, leaving the family behind was also for me to go and heal in a big way. And my wife understood that. Which was, I can't speak enough of a person like that, so unselfishly saying, you know what, hubby, you go. Whatever that means, you go. Because quite frankly, I needed healing and I wasn't going to find it in South Africa. So I believe the call came, and it was really a call. It was supposed to be Thailand. And then China called, and Thailand just lost my CV. And I said, okay, that's kind of odd. And then China called, and I ended up, the first place I was in China was in Chengdu. And I hated it, to the point where being there a month, I was literally ready to pack my bags. But interestingly enough, I couldn't pack my bags because I had no money for a flight back. so, so when I say it's a calling, it was really a calling. And to put it into perspective, I left with 1,500 Rand in my pocket to
Okay.
survive in China. Now, if you look at the currency exchange, you're talking about 750 yuan. That's
Okay.
basically what I had.
But what's the
And
value like? What can you do with that kind of money?
you can buy, if you want to live a normal, let's say a foreign lifestyle and not a local Chinese lifestyle, you
Yeah.
will probably survive for 2 days
Wow.
on 750 yuan. I kid you not.
Yeah.
If it's a Chinese lifestyle, maybe you will make it for about 2 weeks or so.
Yeah. But I mean,
And
at this time, you're not Chinese at that time, right?
I'm not Chinese.
So,
I couldn't speak a single Chinese word. I'm talking
yeah.
like I still can't speak much Chinese, believe it or not, because it's a difficult language.
Yeah.
But I couldn't speak a single Chinese. I couldn't even greet in Chinese when I left.
Yeah.
Um, and it was a scary moment. And
Right.
even that journey of how things changed, the job just didn't work out.
Sure.
Um, I was there for about a month and there was just no work. And it was during school holidays, by the way, which was in China during summer vacation and winter vacation could be about two months
Wow.
of holiday.
Yeah.
And I had equivalent to 2 weeks of basic lifestyle money to survive with the hope that at the end of that month I'm getting paid. And guess
So,
what? Never happened.
yeah. I think in traditional conversation, people would ask, so how did you survive? But I'm not going to ask you that question because you are here. You survived, right?
Yes, I did.
Um,
I did.
so fast forward a little bit further. When I met you, it was at the end of your term in China, and you had actually gone into legacy training because
Correct.
we shared a coach together. And my coach was telling me that you're jumping into property. The reason why I, I I want to ask this question here is that you left for China, and for me, I can relate going to a foreign land for you to look for opportunities, and then coming in back, you might be perceived as if, or you've come back so you've got money, right? Um,
Yeah.
and but actually people don't know the struggles that you had in between to either got the money that you've got now to do what you're trying to do. So by the time we met, you were actively wanting to get involved into property, and you were active already, but you wanted to be more aggressive, so to say.
Correct.
um, and I remember very well you were saying, TJ, I'm willing, call me anyway, to Cape Town, to Durban, to wherever. I'm there. I want to do the deals. So I'm like, okay, cool. This guy is a little bit crazy. Um, but I want to zoom it in into a little bit to ask the question that when you went to China and when you had your other businesses before, you had one or two other properties that you had in your name between you and your wife. Um, why did you choose property other than continue selling hair products, other than coming back to South Africa and pick up your entire family and say, hey, we're going back to China. In China, that's the cool place. We're going to be eating snakes and worms.
Yeah. I think property was always embedded deep down. It was always just sitting there.
Sure.
And I think years ago I went to a few auctions in Cape Town and watched, and I couldn't believe that people are buying properties on auction. I never bought, I never bid it myself, but I looked at it and was like, wow. And I
Yeah.
remember one thing, there was a particular guy in Cape Town, very low key. And I'm now talking about, probably about 20 years ago,
Yeah.
at auctions, and he was just snapping up properties.
Yeah.
Um, And I looked at this guy and I asked him, you know, can I learn from you? And he said, about what? Buying property? I said, yes. He said to me, nah, don't bother with this. It's too difficult. And it's too expensive. Nah, stick to what you're doing. Don't bother with this. So I kind of looked at that, parked it. And when I was in China, funny enough, I will never forget, it was a tough time initially getting to China.
Yeah.
The first year for me, or 2 years, was just healing.
Sure.
It was really just healing. It was forgiving the partners. A lot of tears were rolling from my face because it was hard. It was hard to forgive. But the one thing that I can tell you, even about that situation, and this is why I call it a calling, was the day when I truly forgave them. It was like, and everything opened up from there.
What do you
Property
mean?
dropped into my. When I say everything happened from there, when I forgave, I felt better. When I released them,
Yeah.
I felt better.
Sure.
And it even cost me to send them a message to say, I'm sorry for my part in the breakup. I'm sorry for my part in this relationship not working.
In the business
And
relationship you had.
in the business relationship, that's right, because I had two partners in the recruitment business.
Yeah.
And they never sent the message back to say, we're also sorry or acknowledge your message.
Yeah.
They went ahead and tried to litigate and stuff like that.
Sure.
That's a story for another day. But it released me. And what I mean by it, everything opened up. That bitterness and disappointment and hurt and all of those things, when I released that, I started feeling the healing.
Sure.
And opportunities suddenly popped into my head again. I suddenly started seeing that, hey, you're not going to be in China forever. You're not going to retire here. You could.
Yeah.
The opportunity was certainly there. The offer was made as well. Just stay here, bring your family, come and live here. You've got an apartment here. You've got a beautiful apartment. Just come stay here. But the opportunities and the entrepreneur in me wouldn't let go, if I can put it that way. And that drew opportunities, that drew the plan, that drew, hey, remember years ago, property dropped into your head, your spirit. Um, why didn't you start learning about that again and see how you feel? And that's exactly what I started doing while teaching in China. I started learning about property for about 5 years, I think.
How did
Before
you start?
I started inquiring, and the legacy thing was an absolute blessing.
Yeah.
So I was on my own looking at books. So I went back to my old favorite book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. What an amazing. I don't know one property entrepreneur or investor that has not read that book.
Yeah, that's
And and if you didn't, then I don't know why not.
yeah.
But I went back and I got the pages are yellow already, but I got my old book and I read that probably 15 years ago. I picked it up again. I started reading about it. I
Yeah.
then bought, when I visited South Africa, I visited twice a year, by the way. So I saw my family during winter and summer vacation. I would come back and use the power of the yuan, which was now double, working and feeling you're getting paid double time was always good. And I came back and I would buy books, invest
Yeah.
in books, property books. But I have to admit, it wasn't enough. It ignited the learning or the journey, but there was that practical side I sensed that I needed more of. And hence the legacy thing and meeting Andrew and Dave and all these fantastic people. And that's where the true learning for me actually started happening. Everything opened up from that point.
Yeah. Okay, good stuff. I mean, that's an amazing journey. I mean, we can end this recording now, actually. But I wanted to speak for us to cover out something very key for me, and a lot of people actually don't know how to do this thing, and yet it's truly available. when we met, you were like just saying, TJ, I'm just hungry to do deals. We took a trip at one point in Cape Town. And by the way, I'm always bragging to say, when I'm in Cape Town, I've got a chauffeur. We drive around in a TT. His name is Paul Adams.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
But I also want to zoom into that relationship, Paul, because that relationship started from Norway, and in all the interactions that we have had, we have also just found out that we are very much alike in terms of who we are. We both very dedicated to our faith. We both dedicated to our families. We want to create and make a difference in other people's lives. You have saved me numerous times, and I appreciate that. And over and above that, we have shared frustrations, life's frustrations. And not to mention that, because people start thinking that, hey, when you are doing property deals, there are no frustrations. They come in all the time. They are actually 10 times if you're not doing any deals. But I want to go back to the point of, there we are, we started a relationship, and you initiated more of the relationship in my space by wanting to save me. And I want to understand, I mean, I could see it because I do that as well, right? It's a principle that I've got on saving others. But why that? Why that type of an angle of saving others?
There's a lot of speak about China, and you will always hear me talking about China. I love China.
Sure.
I know there are many people that will say a lot of different things, and I get it.
Yeah.
I'm not oblivious to those things. I've experienced little bit of what I call not racism in China, but I've experienced classism in China. Most of my friends are Chinese.
Sure.
I deem many of those people, they've become my family. To this day, we are in contact. We've made connections that will never be broken.
Sure.
So if I could call a second home, my second home would be China. What I've learned, and I'm mentioning that because what I've learned from the Chinese, I've seen how these people are there, the ones that I met, to serve, to give.
Yeah.
And I have to admit, I have never in my entire life experienced such magnitude of giving and just opening themselves up. Once you are, let's call it the inner circle in a Chinese friend, that friend, TJ, will basically swim over an ocean and rivers and jump hoops for you.
Yeah.
I almost want to go as far as saying they will die for you. Wow. And the basis of that is the giving nature, understanding a struggle, understanding that they came from World War II basically obliterated, and they had to pick up this whole nation from scratch. They had no food, famine was rife. And while there, I could learn all these things that I never knew about China. And I must admit, if you don't leave China after experiences like that changed, then there's something wrong with you. And China changed me. It changed the way I view people. Yeah. It changed the way I think. It changed the way I give. And I was always a giver, but I promise you, it completely changed the way I view things. And I think latching on to you as a person, because before you were a property mogul, you are a person. You were a father, you were a husband. And I don't know what it was, but I could connect to that. I could connect to, and I was more intrigued to see, am I right? I wanted to find out, am I right? Is there another who's got a similar way of thinking, who sees life a similar way, who's gone through struggles? And I learned about you basically as a person as I went along. And bear in mind, it wasn't easy for me to trust.
Sure.
I must admit, after that horrible relationship with partners that I had, business partners, it wasn't easy. So it was the first person in property that I literally had to say, okay, I'm gonna trust, was
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And if it, I know this for a fact, if it wasn't for that encounter at the property show where we met, then I don't know where I am now. And we're talking about what? You were right, actually. We met in 2018, so apologies. So it was about almost 2 years ago, you're right. But if it wasn't for that encounter, I really don't know how my journey would have looked like. And yes, I'm a baby. It's an infancy stage for me, but so much has happened since that time. But I think it was more just that connection was I could sense there is something similar. I was intrigued and I wanted to go that distance to find out, am I right? Are there good people in the world? And I can now irrevocably say, yes, there are good people in the world. So yeah.
So since we met 2018, at that time you had just come back from China at that time, and let's just talk about how many deals you have done. The ones I know, two with the estate agent,
Yes.
one where we are both partners, another one where you are leading. We are sort of like partners in it, but you are like, I just went to Cape Town maybe twice maybe and saw that deal, but you literally like doing everything there.
Yeah.
So it's around about 5 deals that I know you have closed and have initiated. Some you have lost money, some we're making good
True.
money. Um, and and out of all of this, right, it just came out from meeting, and there we are. We're starting to do some good deals. I want to zoom in into one particular deal, Paul, because I think this is when I say to you, hey, let's do this thing, because I'm always seeing people that buy and sell properties, and not to say that that's bad, that's good for them, but for me, I feel like it's not my happy place, and I want to demonstrate today on this call here that we're having why I don't like doing that. I like the idea of holding. So let's jump in to talk about the deal that we were down in Durban, so I flew from Johannesburg and you flew from Cape Town, and we spent 2-3 days there together in Durban looking at opportunities. And whilst we are having a conversation, we started talking about a particular deal that you had, and this was from long time ago, and you had bought it in your personal capacity together, you and your wife. And whilst we were talking about it, we discovered that it's cash flowing nicely, right?
Yes.
And in exchanging notes, we said, okay, fine. Should we sell this? Should we not sell it? But it's a good project. Should we how best can we make money out of it? I think that was the discussion that we were having. How best can we extract some money out of it? And maybe just give us a short indication of what that deal is all about. What is it? Give us a description. Is it a house? Is it a what?
Okay, great. Yes, I remember that conversation quite. Yeah, it was another one of those moments. I think
It
in
was
your
under
in
a
your
tree
career.
at the gate, actually.
Yes, it's a moment.
Yeah,
And in those moments, something just drops.
yeah,
And I remember we started chatting, and I was saying, "Look, I'm back now officially, by the way, from China, exactly a year.
yeah,
May 10th it was a year, and we had that conversation um, during that time. Just coming back, okay, I'm gonna be whatever else. But that moment, I'll never forget. So there's a property that my wife and myself acquired about 12 years ago.
yeah,
It's a 3 bedroom, 1 bathroom, lounge, kitchen in an estate.
yeah,
And We purchased that property for about 396,000 at the
Yeah.
time.
Sure.
And believe it or not, we nearly lost that property. When this whole issue with the partnership happened, things just went wrong. Cars were repossessed,
Yeah.
BMWs had to go,
Yeah.
and we nearly lost this property. And I remember I called my wife, and this is pretty much how the journey also started, the landlord journey started. I called my wife, uh, head hanging, and I said, look, just got off the phone with the bank. I'll never forget the lady's name. It was Mrs. Manuel. Mrs. Manuel was on the line with me. She doesn't want to talk to me anymore. She's done. This property is going on auction. And I said to my wife, they require, I think, something like, in fact, she didn't want to talk to me anymore. She didn't want to say how to rescue this property. She was just done. And my wife said to me, because I came to her um, late in the game. By then, the property was empty. We were living somewhere else. And I was renting out the property, had no idea what I was doing. Clearly, hence
Yeah.
the property went into arrears, etc. My wife jumped in, long story short, rescued the property, and then said, fine, I'm going to manage this property now.
Yeah.
I said, please do, because I'm at the balls up. Now, fast forward 12 years later, we under the tree. And I don't know the significance about under the tree. I'm not going to be too philosophical today. But we're under this tree and this money tree, call it a money tree.
Yeah.
And we're standing there and this penny drops. And I tell you about this particular property. And I said, we have this property. I'm full-time in property. Um, Although I'm not earning a penny, but I'm full-time in property. I planned it that way. I purposed it that way.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to go work for a boss. I wasn't going back to corporate. I wasn't going to start any other business until the property business is up and running. And I mentioned this property, this 3-bedroom apartment in this estate. And I said, it's 396K. My wife is working. I am not. So she gets this amazing thing called, this piece of paper called a payslip.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, under the tree, for the first time in my entire life, something you said made me realize how powerful that piece of paper is. And I was like, you mean a payslip can do all of that?
Yeah.
And the penny dropped. And we were discussing ways of extracting value from this property. And I looked at it and
without selling it.
Without selling it. That was the thing. Because at the time, I knew this is a cash cow.
Yeah.
And for about 11 years, this property has been paying for itself. We've never had any rental that wasn't paid during that time after I stepped away from it.
Yeah. After your wife fired you.
She fired me basically. And so from there it was fine. And I couldn't, while I was in China for that 6 years, she was dealing with it. And she was doing fantastic. And I remember chatting to her and after talking to you, and I said, look, you mentioned something called refinancing.
Yeah.
And I must admit, I've never heard the word before. Now, I'm a 45-year-old man. I've run businesses successfully, but I've never heard of refinancing, which shows me again that we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
And education is key. And I listened very carefully on how this works. And I then went and investigated a little bit deeper. And in a nutshell, it was basically trying to extract the equity, the money that's sitting within this property now, having it for 12 years almost, without selling the property. And that opened up a whole level of learning and value as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So in a nutshell here, Paul, so you've got this property, you bought it for an odd 400. And where is the property now? I mean, what have you done with the property? How did you refinance? Just take us through the step by step. You know, after the money tree, then what?
So essentially, the property was now, obviously it was Adams, which is my wife and I. We
Okay.
purchased it in 2007.
Right.
It's not a big property. It's about 177 square meters.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the earth size. And it's about 70 something, I think, in floor size. And last year, when I started looking at this thing, I realized that the market value of this property is 950,000 rand.
Right.
Um, and because of these
The
delays,
value of it was 900,000.
900, say about 950,000,
Sure.
call it an E. And I looked at this and I thought to myself, we bought this property initially. We bought the property for 396,000 rand.
Yeah.
We then obviously ran in arrears with the bank, trying to catch up, which meant that at this point, the property, the value of the bond, the amount of the bond that was owed to the bank still was about, let's call it 360,000. And that's
Yeah.
obviously because of interest and running behind and interest and compounded interest. Another topic for another day.
Yeah.
So technically, we now owed 300, call it 360,000 on this property. However, after our discussion, I realized, but even so, A, you haven't paid it. When I say you, Adams haven't paid this bond for like 11 years. So technically, someone else has been paying this off. So yes,
Yeah.
the debt is sitting there, but we haven't paid it. But it was by default. We
Right.
became landlords by default. When we had this amazing discussion under the money tree, the tree of knowledge, I then realized the following. How do you extract the value from this property? With 950K, I then went back to my wife, and this is, I almost want to pause a little bit on that. I went back to my wife and tried to explain what I've just learned. So
Yeah.
I went to the missus and I said, "Hey, remember a guy called TJ? Oh yeah, I heard of this TJ suddenly. Where did you meet TJ? Did you meet him in China?" I said, "No, I met him in Cape Town." But how could you have met him in Cape Town when you just came back? I said, "Well, I did, at
Yeah.
this property thing, and we had this conversation." And she was quite concerned that I flew to Durban to go and meet you and go look at property deals, not. Well, well, I think she was a little bit worried, I suppose. Are you going to come back? um, long, story, long story short, I came back and I explained refinancing to my wife.
Yeah.
And being an educator and the teacher in me, I always look at people's eyes.
Right.
When people are learning something or something is new, you will either get facial expressions like,
Yeah.
or you'll get, or you'll get, and then you get the interest. And
Right.
I saw this from my wife. The first time I talked about refinancing, she went, and I knew she's not getting it. She doesn't understand it yet.
Yeah.
And what it meant was I wasn't explaining it well enough. So I tried again. I went back. I took a step back. I said, "Okay, don't talk to her now. You don't know the topic well enough. Move away." I went back. I went to go research a little, and I made sure that I knew it. Then I picked up and I said, "Hey, let's have a quick chat." Made some tea, and I explained it again.
Yeah.
And I explained it basically as follows. And I said, "There is money in our bond."
Right.
And the question I asked her was, "Are we going to go back to this house to live there?" And she said to me, "No, we're never going to go live there again." And my eyes went to ching.
Okay.
If we're not going to go live there again, and there's value or equity or money in this building, then I want that money out
Right.
because I want to fund my property journey. And I said to her, "Now, what if I tell you we can sell this property and not have a bond anymore, but control this property?" And she said to me, "Tell me more."
All
I
right.
said to her, "Look," I said to her, "Listen, babes,
If I was
let's."
in the background, I'll be cheering you like preach.
I said to her, "Babes, you know what? Let's open up a property company, a company that's purely going to deal with holding our properties.
Yeah.
And I said to her, firstly, this primary, let's call it our primary residence, is still on our name. We're going to go into property.
Yeah.
I don't want this on our names. And I
Right.
went and I spoke to, got some legal advice as well, and they explained why. And I could then take that back and say, these are the reasons why. I said, but what if I tell you we can still benefit from having this asset, this property that's been sitting there, but also getting money out of it? I said,
Yeah.
cool. So she asked me, so if we open up a property company, then what? I said, fantastic. I'm glad you asked that question. And I said, what we then do is we sell this property to that company. She looked at me with, I will never forget, with disbelief, if you like. She said, so who owns the company? I said, we control the company. She said, so what happens to the house? I said, we sell it to that company. And she said, but we still have control? I said, yes, because we then become directors, managing directors of the company.
Yeah.
And she said, so what happens to the money? I said, the nice part is we also control the money. And
This is
when it
getting
was
exciting.
explained, when it was explained to me initially, I genuinely, I didn't doubt it.
Yeah.
Because by the time I met the likes of Andrew and Dave and all of those guys, I became a believer.
Yeah.
I was more a believer because I want to go do it myself.
Sure.
I want to go see, does this work? Hence, my wife agreed and she said, okay. And I said to her, is that a yes? Can we sell this property? And she said, yes, sell it. Best day of my life.
Yeah.
And
Did you bring
so
out the OTP and say, sign here, sign here?
yes, there was an OTP ready.
Yeah.
And I remember I registered the company, which I called the names, the four letters of my daughter's names, which is Phoenix and Channing. So I registered the company called Phoechan Enterprises.
Okay.
And Phoechan Enterprises was strategically also chosen like that because all we want to do is build a legacy for our daughters. We want them not to go through these struggles that we went through in our lives. So it is primarily a family business. And it's going to be that for a very long time. And I registered that business in 2019, which was like, hey, last year, because there's no 2020. It never came. So I, boom, no 2020. So I registered in 2019, I think in July. And but now bear in mind, I don't have the power of that piece of paper called a payslip. So it's a brand new business, which means that banks will require 2 years financials.
Yeah.
And a whole lot of jumping through hoops. Again, it took me to go and learn and get the education on how do you do this if you don't have this piece of paper, you don't have the financials either.
Yeah.
And I want to pause there for a moment, but it worked. Um, it worked. So what I did was, I don't know if you want to ask something before I continue, because I can just roll with this.
No, so I think this is where, I tend not want to throw out ideas to people and like go and do it at home. On TV they always say, don't try this at home, And for me here, it is just an opportune time for me where I can easily say to people, it is important to get the education. Because when you've got the education behind you, it makes so much sense on why you're doing what you're doing. So I actually want to wrap it up and say, well, when you had the property in your name, Mr. and Mrs. Adams, how much rent were you getting at that time?
We were getting about 7,500 rand per month.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now that you are you've got a bond on it, how much you're getting as your rent out there?
At this point still, because the deal is nearly concluded,
Right.
it is still 7,500 Rand. And after all deductions, everything, the mortgage, the municipality, the rates and taxes, all of those things, it's cash flowing, or it's leaving us with an amount of about 3,400 when I checked the last time in cash every month.
Okay. That would be on your old numbers of 396, I think, right?
396, that's correct, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So if you're to extract all of the money out, you still own the property in your company, but if you had to extract all of it, I don't know what the bank gave you, but if you had to get your entire 950, which is the value of the property, you are going to be in the negative, but you have money that you can now play with in other projects, and those projects can actually sustain this property. So it's a business now where you have one asset which you still own, and the money can be sitting in there because you don't have to extract it now, isn't it? It can stay there. As different banks have different terminologies of that money sitting in there. But the moment you take it out, then your interest goes up, your repayment.
True.
But the beauty of it is that you now have an owed 500,000.
That's true.
That you can do stuff with, you know. That 500 is literally available to you. No red tape. You can your only red tape is your wife here to go and ask her, can we extract 500 to go into this deal? It could be a cash deal. It could be a JV. It's endless.
Precisely.
Yeah. I mean, high five to this that you have done here. But I think the most important thing here is that we spoke about it. We explored the options. You were like a sponge. You consumed, but out of consuming, you went out and you started looking for options. You know, legally what is allowed. But what is more important for me, Paul, here is that when you went home to explain, the first time it was a no. I don't know how many times you explained until she said yes, but your dedication in wanting to educate, right? But what about partners who are actually educating themselves together at the same time? Imagine if she was in the same class with you. Imagine she was under the same tree with me and you. I mean, the conversation is now no longer about persuading each other. It is more just about how do we do it, you know? And here I am more talking about, you know, people that are wanting to start off who are couples. And I'm always saying, you know, it's better to jump into it together. But if it's not possible, know that in your journey somewhere along the line, you need to be the convincing guy. Whether you're the lady, I see it with a lot of ladies actually, because there's a lot of ladies in South Africa right now that are more of the wearing pants kind of like than some of our brothers out there. But that's just the society we live in. Paul, I want to come back to another conversation in conclusion. Now you've got this business going. Your elder daughter, I think she's involved. She gets involved in the projects. Now, the benefits that you are now seeing being actively involved in the property space, you know, what kind of benefits are you now seeing that are materializing that you're doing this full time that we're talking about? And more so, your daughter, I know she does some other cool things on a time, but in the spare time, she's also helping you in all of these other deals that have come by. If we were to mention this particular one, so you got like 5-7 deals that you're busy with all this time. But what benefits are you realizing so far in your journey?
I am, I think a great question. I think from a soft, let's call it the soft side of benefits. I now have the ability I have the freedom, if I can call it that, to spend quality time with my family.
Right.
So I can spend quality time. I have the freedom of movement. I have the freedom of just being with them, and to me that's huge. I missed out on 6 years, and even when I was here, I wasn't quite here because of the challenges that life had at the time, and what the corporate world and the business world at that time brought. So for me, family time is absolutely critical. I can now sit with my family, be there at a decent time. I can work from home. If I choose to work from home, I know what to get done and what the day looks like. But I'm so much more relaxed, if I can put it that way. And it also allowed me to be more involved with changing other people's lives,
Right.
spending time with those still wanting to get into either business or whatever else.
Yeah.
So I use a lot of my time to educate and share my learnings. And it's amazing. I must admit, looking back, I'm sometimes shocked with how much how much I've learned over this short space of time, knowing that there are so much more to learn.
Yeah.
But what I think is little, if I share it with someone else, suddenly they look at me and it's like, wow. So it allowed me, just being full time, allows me to give back,
Yeah.
to share learnings, and I think what I love about the property space is there's no there's no there's no concern of competition as such. It's a very different type of business. It's a networking, openly networking. It's sharing information. It's collaboration. It's working together on deals.
Yeah.
It's quite frankly, the property space, understanding it a little bit better now blows my mind. And just to wrap up that question, it really gave me freedom, absolute freedom. I am not financially free as yet,
Yeah.
but I'm not in the rat race as such. I'm not having to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, having to jump in my car, drive 2 hours to Cape Town Central, and spend 5 or 8 hours working for an employer that does not appreciate me. I don't have any of that. I don't have those frustrations, which means I'm absolutely more focused and more productive. Um, and it opens up a world of opportunities, even during COVID,
Yeah.
which is interesting. And I'll share it with you a little bit more in depth. But I've just um, gone into buying a internet cafe print shop, which is pretty much a NPO, if you like. And we're going to raise funds to feed communities and to train communities. So it's exciting times. This would never have happened, if it wasn't the property space,
Yeah.
because the property is there. It's a beautiful property. It just sits there. It doesn't need me to run to it at 8 o'clock in the morning and leave there at 9 at night. And it's amazing. And the passiveness or the passive income, it comes. And
Yeah.
yes, there will be challenges. This is the beautiful picture. COVID hit, and I had 1 month where my tenant, we had a conversation. We deferred the payment. They back on track this month. Last month they couldn't pay, and I was like, I understand. Yes, it was pressure, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
And this month they're back on track,
Yeah.
and they will basically pay that off, because again, it was education. 5 years
I mean,
ago, I would have just blew a gasket and just, you must pay. With what money? So we would
yeah.
have gone nowhere with that.
I mean, I know of another deal where you're involved right now. You haven't you've put the deal on contract,
Yes.
um, and the rent is being you don't own that property. Uh, you have done some light renovation on it, and you are banking rent money that's coming to you. And again, that's the whole thinking around you don't have to own everything in your personal capacity, but you need to be in control.
can I just touch on that? That deal excites me more than my own House Bardale deal. And I'll tell you why. I also heard and I learned from people that you can you can get into property without owning property. I didn't believe it.
Yeah.
That deal is an amazing deal. And I'll tell you why. I don't own the property, but I solved a problem.
Okay.
And yes, it took a little bit of legal speak, it took a little bit of intellect. And in a nutshell, just to wrap up that deal, it started out as do a quotation and fix up the property. Give me a quote to fix up the property, which then flowed into, oops, nope, this quotation is very high because the property is damaged. It was tenanted at the time. They weren't paying. The rates account was sky high. So there was a problem
Yeah.
that needed to be solved, a massive problem.
Yeah.
I then got involved. I was asked, hey, can't you get these people out of this property? And I said, this wasn't part of the deal, but you know what? I'll give it a go. I then managed to, in a nice way, no legs were broken, no egos were bruised. I then managed to sit with this family and say, this is where we're at. If you stay, you're going to be loaded with debt, and smart speak, and got them to see reason. And
Yeah.
the day
But
when
I've
they
seen a
told me,
baseball bat in your car before.
it's not mine. It's not. But I managed to get them to even see reason and even solve their problem.
Sure.
So by leaving, they left primarily without debt.
Right.
So, if you get into the nitty gritty of things, they were living for free. You
Right.
can't live for free. You have to pay. So they left eventually. And so I evicted them,
Yeah.
in using a term, evicted them, and eventually got the property ready, sold the property,
Right.
cha-ching, not my property, sold that property, facilitated that deal, and also tenanted the property while they are paying occupational rent. And why that deal excites me is after negotiations, I am now drawing rental from the property. Maybe it's just for a month, maybe it's for 2 months, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I am now also able to draw rental. And
Yeah.
that deal is probably going to be one of my focus points going forward. That deal to me is probably the biggest learnings that I've ever had so far.
Cool. I mean, we are living in exciting times. The real estate has been, I think it's always been around. We just were not exposed to it the way that we are. And that's why all of this looks so exciting and cool with us. But Paul, it's been great having you around. And this section here that we speak of, it's just called The Real Deal. And this is where we just talk about, an example of a deal that you've gone in. So you have shared more than one deal to us. We appreciate that. And I'm hoping that, other people have gotten through some nuggets into there. I've certainly gotten through some nuggets. But I want to ask you 3 questions, Paul, off the cuff, right? You just need to think of them, and off the cuff, you just need to answer me an answer. If at any given time, and Paul is chilled out on a chilled out day, where would we find Paul?
On the beach. On the beach.
On the beach.
I'm a beach bum. So you're going to find me on the beach, walking around, not swimming necessarily, but walking on the beach.
Nice.
And just enjoying the fresh air.
Nice. Any favorite books, business books that you've got?
Rich Dad Poor Dad will always be that book that I go back to. One of my other favorite books, I think it's Dr. Spencer, Who Moved My Cheese?
Yeah.
Also old one. I love that book because it's short. It's very, very short. Yeah. And of late, I've really gotten into Palo Calo. And the one book, I've got all these books now. I'm not through them yet. But the one that I specifically love and would recommend, and people have different opinions on it, is The Alchemist. And The Alchemist for me is exciting because after reading it, and I read it on a plane flying back from Dubai to Beijing, I finished it and I not only wept because of certain things that were so real, but I realized that you can actually turn anything or some things into gold. I'm not going to give away too much of the book. You need to go read it. It's kind of that books like what's it, The Richest Man in Babylon. It's
Yeah.
got a similar, to me, it's got a similar type of feel. But I don't want to give too much away of that book. But I've learned how to turn stuff into gold, the alchemy of turning things into gold. And I'm not even saying that lightly. I genuinely mean it, that you can turn dead things into value, into cash flowing. It's just amazing. So that's one of the big books for me.
Cool. In closing, Paul, thanks very much. Is there one or two tips if anyone else is wanting to start? They could be sitting anywhere else and you're saying, hey, for you to start in real estate, these are the 3 things that you need to do. 1, 2, what are those 3 things or 2 things or 1 thing that you need to do?
I think the first thing for me would be authentic.
Okay.
Be true to who you are. If I can make an example, I am not Andrew Walker, you know.
Yeah.
I'm not Dave, I'm not TJ. I'm Paul Adams, and this is my ability. So own who you are. Don't try to don't try to act like someone else. Learn from them, fantastic, but be true to who you are. So be authentic. The other thing I would say is get an education, get educated. And I know many of the listeners and viewers have probably heard this before, but I'm going to urge you, do not attempt going into property just because you want to get into property and you think there's a lot of money. You can make a lot of money and you can lose a lot of money. So get educated, get trained. And I think if I can wrap it up, never stop learning. This journey of life is about learning. You're
Awesome.
never going to know everything. Never ever going to know everything. And that's okay. It's the one thing that I would say, it's fine. If you don't know, you don't know. It's okay. Own who you are, be true to who you are, never stop learning, and get into this thing, get learning, and you can achieve pretty much anything you set your mind to.
Boom! Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it right. That is from Paul Adams. And I've asked him before, him and Paul Adams, the singer, they each. And the names are spelled correctly, but the brothers definitely do look different, right? So it's been awesome. Thanks a lot, Paul, for allowing us, to be here as a guest for us. Clearly, we've learned quite a lot. So there you are, ladies and gentlemen. I did tell you on M5 Successful Friends, we only bring you the successful. It is over and out from me. God bless and cheers. Goodbye.